I remember reading something that you got left back on purpose 3 times.
Yeah.
What is that even about?
So to paint a picture, growing up in Queens, my mother was a great woman, really trying to take care of the kids, doing the best she can. But her illnesses, and people always say, "What'd she have?" And I said, "It's like the trials of Job." She had a little bit of everything. Like, was kind of thrown at her. But her knees were giving out. She had a thyroid condition. She was very heavy. It was very hard for her to move around. And here we were trying to stay above water, and the water was rising every day. And she is the one who gave me the idea. I watched her go as an adult, get her GED, and then go to college with it. And when I was probably seventh grade, I thought, well, why don't I just do that on purpose? Like, if I can go ahead and drop out of high school, I can get a job as a college student a lot faster. Everything was about, how do I get out of poverty as fast as possible? Sure. And so that was the epiphany. Got to 9th grade, and I said, well, this is the play that I'm going to run. And I would just sit in the back of the homeroom with all the kids with the beepers back in the day, doing whatever they would do it, right? And I was just kept my head on the desk and just would nap for a couple of years until it was time. But then it was time.
You were hibernating.
Oh well, yeah, getting picked up by the truant police at McDonald's. It was kind of. Then I'd go home, watch the Gulf War in the afternoon for a bit, and come back. It was just I pulled up my transcript a couple of years ago, so I had to give a speech, and legitimately like a 48 was my average. So I would just deliberately wait, right? Because that was the play I was running. Plus, I was working at a deli overnight. I'd carry my butterfly knife to this place in Woodhaven, Queens, because all the degenerates would come in the middle of the night ordering their corncob pipes and doing whatever, crazy period of time.
Crack time, probably.
Yeah, exactly. So that to me it was, this is not a sustainable life anyway. So I'm going to make a choice. I come up with this path, which is I'm going to drop out and I'm going to start high school. I'm going to start college early. It's one thing to come up with a plan and then actually have to execute.
And go get your GED.
And go get my GED. And I remember when the rubber meets the road. Now I'm 16. Been left back 3 years in a row, I guess. And now it's time. And you have to return all your textbooks. And I remember walking, and that's like, now you're with all your peers and they're all moving on with their life and they're starting to get serious, and you're returning your textbooks as a high school dropout.
Sure.
And I remember walking into my science teacher, Mr. Rosenthal, if you're still around, you left an impression. And I remember giving him my textbook, and he looks to me for the whole class. He's like, Higgins, such a waste, so talented. And he's like, I was like, oh, whatever, made some stupid snarky comment.
Sure.
He's like, I'll see you at McDonald's. Right. And I remember turning around. I said, you know what? If you see me at McDonald's, it's because I own it. And I was like, Matt out. Then I sat down on the steps of Doza, smoked a cigarette, and I was like, I may have just thrown my life away. Like all the bravado was gone. It was like It was almost like you could hear the blood rushing through your ears. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I've done this.
Well, and what was your next step from there?
Well, like everything I do, when I'm at these moments of transcendence, take a step back, gather, say, no, you are operating according to instinct, pure, raw instinct. Your mother is getting progressively worse. This is eventually not going to end well, and you need to make as much money as humanly possible, as fast as possible, and this is a smart way to do it. And I remember going to GED classes at Queensborough Community College, sitting in the room and thinking, like, this is not for me. Like, I think I could pass this test. I'm not going to take 6 months worth of classes. Next week, I went to Springfield Gardens High School in Queens. Took my GED on standby. Following week, I took my SATs. And then within 3 months, I was enrolled in college. And so then I was like, okay, that worked. No one stopped me. Now I'm 16. Now I'm in college. I was like, well, let's press this. By the end of the year, I was president of the debate team. So then I go to my prom. I'm like, let me do a little victory lap. Let me go see my science teacher. And so everyone's around. I was like, oh, how's high school going? I just finished my first year. I have a 3.6, and I'm president of the debate team. Nice to meet you. So I tell that story always because I had to make so many unconventional decisions that didn't seem to make sense from an outsider looking in. But you don't realize, because I never invited anybody over to my house, that my mother is dying in the next room. And it doesn't matter. There's no government agency that's going to run in. There's government cheese in the refrigerator. I'm embarrassed. I'm not telling my friends. We're taking the Q27 bus to a pantry every weekend to get food. Nobody knows because we tend to hide our deepest problems and our struggles. So that decision was the absolute smartest decision I could have made, but it looked crazy from the outside looking in. Once I started going down that path, it's very hard to stop. Once you sort of flex that muscle of unconventional decision making, right, and it works out, then it becomes almost like a drug. Like, oh, wait a second, I don't need to listen to anybody. I have the answers inside myself.
I tell you, your story is just incredible because it's like, now you're in college, right?
Yeah.
You got a GED. But and then maybe I'm skipping a little, but how does it even come a possibility where you become the press secretary for Rudy Giuliani? Like, how does that? For me, like, I'm sure you told the story a bunch of times, but for me, it's like I'm like, how does that even like add up?
Yeah, I don't know how to tell the story. Like, I know what the underlying drive was, which was mostly desperation. Right, I just kept connecting the dots to go as fast as humanly possible to get out of poverty, because all I wanted to do was take care of my mother, but selfishly, I wanted to be emancipated. No kid wants to take care of their parent. I don't care how nice you are.
Sure.
And I
I
like to think that I was a sweet kid. I was as resentful as anybody else that I was taking care of her. So I wanted to make as much money as possible so she'd be okay, but so that I could be emancipated, right? And that fueled me. And I started just watching the patterns, right? Like, I think very early on, I was given a gift of pattern recognition and started applying it to my own life. So I figured out I was pretty good as a communicator. So let me do that. And I became a reporter at a very young age while I was still in college, and became a little bit of a muckraker. I'd do investigative reporting, and people would send me their problems for a local newspaper, and I would win some journalism awards and whatnot. And I just started pressing whatever it was that I was talented at, and I was continued to be willing to be uncomfortable constantly. So I would be the one who, after 1 year wasn't promoted, I would quit the job, and I kept kind of jumping and doing whatever necessary to climb as fast as possible. I knew that the GED would always be a little bit of a scar now on my record that would be hard to explain. So rather than explain it, I said, I'll just go get a law degree at a fancy law school. And I was on law review. So that would end up in a footnote kind of way, say, oh, you also were smart, right? Like, you weren't a total, You weren't a total fuck up.
Because the GD, it's crazy, but it has like a stain to it.
Oh, it does have a stain. And so, but I always tell people this is when I talk to kids too. Like, I've talked to kids in the Bronx doing a GD program. I said, what's interesting about life is you won't be judged by where you started, but by where you ended up and how much ground you covered in between. So where you started when you screwed up actually becomes an asset, so long as the juxtaposition from where you are now is great enough, right? So a GD has that little bit of the stigma, but if you go to law school, especially if you're on law review and it's a top school, it actually is more just an interesting data points. But I knew I needed to do something about that, and then I would make more money if I obviously had a law degree. So all during those years from 16 to 26, which was a critical period, I just kept hustling, being willing to go from job to job. If I didn't get promoted, I left Giuliani 3 times. No,
really?
Two times. Yeah, because first year I'm 20. Let's just say I'm 2 years old. It took me 7 years to graduate college because I went 2 jobs during the day. I went to school at night. It took 7 years. And then first year at the mayor's office, I was ghostwriting speeches and writing all these crazy things, and I'm making $27,000 a year. And then I said, I want to be deputy press secretary in charge of all like law enforcement, because I want that. I want to. And they're like, okay, simmer down, young man.
Calm down, buddy.
Calm down, be patient. Which lasted for like a week, and I was like,
young grasshopper.
Yeah, young grasshopper, Danielson.
Yeah.
So wax on, wax on.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't. I left. I actually went to an insurance company, and they were paying for law school, and it was doubled my salary, except, again, I could hear the blood rushing through my ears. It was like a 9-to-5 job. Like, this is soul crushing. I got to get back. And they offered me a job back at the mayor's office again, doubling my salary. So. And then I did it, again, a year and a half later. And no one really knew the true situation at home. I always kind of kept it a secret. I carried a lot of shame when I was a kid. And I thought nobody cared, nobody would help, and I was embarrassed. So no one really saw kind of what I felt like was a gun to my head. But as a result, it motivated me to keep making moves, keep jumping until I could end up at a good spot.
So how did the day come where, how were you... known that you got this position?
So
because I also know it was a happy day, and at the same time a very sad day.
Yeah, I'm in my last year of law school at night, my 4th year at Fordham, trying to hold it all together, and my mother's just getting progressively worse. I was making decent money, but we still didn't have anything. She couldn't even get out of bed anymore. And she was just struggling. I used to always want to keep an ear out for her, but at the same time, I would try to sleep. I used to wrap a towel around my head so I could hear through the fabric through the night. Like, this is how crazy it was. but completely exhausted. And I was working at an internet company, and the mayor called, and it was April of 2001, and offered me a job as press secretary, which I was overwhelmed by. I'm like, I'm taking care of my mother. I'm at law school. I can barely keep up. Press secretary of the mayor of New York. But I would have been the youngest one in history, 26 years old, and the money was phenomenal. At the time, I think it was over $100,000 a year. So to go from GED to $100,000, it was finally enough money that I could take care of my mother.
Sure.
Material change in our life that I felt I needed to do it. So and it was the last year of the administration. And if anybody worked in government knows, you're like a lame duck. Nobody cares about you. It's like basically you're on your way out, and everybody says good riddance. And that's what April 2001 was. So I figured, all right, I can do law school, and I could take this job, make a lot of money. And the night before I start, my mother was in really bad shape and just was saying, please don't go to work. Like, don't go to work today. And I remember fighting with her, like, we have no money. If I don't go to work, like, there's literally no money in this house. I have to go. So I go to work that day, and around 10 in the morning, I call her, and she said, well, apparently when you call an ambulance, you have to go to the hospital. I said, you called an ambulance. That's good. I was always hoping somebody would intervene, right? And a little bit of backstory, we would spend probably one night a month in the emergency room, because when you're growing up poor and you have no insurance, you tend to use the ER as your family clinic.
Sure.
So I would sit outside the ER and read my law school textbooks, and nobody would ever do anything. You'd wait for 4 hours, and then we'd go home at 4 in the morning, go back to work. So I assumed this was just another one of those times. And I said, I'll come meet you. Where are you going? She asked the EMTs, and they were taking her to Long Island Jewish, and I assumed this would just be another day. And by the time I got there, she had just died. So for me, I'd just become, press secretary of the mayor of New York, and this lifelong struggle that I had been trying to win, I had just lost. So it was at the exact precipice of success. I feel like it all kind of came crashing down, which was completely surreal. Like everything, I just lost it in the hospital, and to me that's always defined how I see the world too. Number one, it doesn't always end well, right?